Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today we're talking about how to choose your daily driver, your primary vehicle, if you have the option of having two vehicles, because this is a new situation to me. I've only owned two vehicles for the last year and a half. Prior to that, I only had one vehicle, and that vehicle was a Scion FRS in 2013 for about 9.5 years. And then I had a Toyota GR86 for about a year and a half. And now I have a CX-50, which is that one right back there. So I've learned a few things, and now driving this 2024 Mazda CX-30 Turbo with the Premium Plus package, it's got me thinking a little bit about what I enjoy about my car, what I don't, what I wish I knew going into this, right? So first off, big thanks to Cardinale Way Mazda out here in Las Vegas for loading me the CX-30. I get all my service done. The reason I'm actually driving that CX-50, or my buddy is driving that CX-50 right now with me to Cardinale Way, is because we're getting an oil change, and they have great service there. So I actually think I'm very fortunate in having made a better decision than I even thought with my Mazda CX-50. So I was looking for a daily driver, and for those who are familiar with the channel, you know that I was considering an IS500 from Lexus, a BMW M340i as my two main options. And then I saw the CX-50. It was recently released at the time, and I fell in love with the looks. I drove one. I was like, damn, this actually drives a lot better than I thought. And I then changed completely from going sports sedan to then small CUV. And I'm really grateful that I didn't go with an IS500 or an M340i. And the reason being, I think if you only have one car and you need that one car to do everything, it makes sense that you naturally need to compromise. So for a lot of people, they need 4 or 5 seats that are functional, which is why an IS500, M340i, or even the lower trims of those vehicles could make a lot of sense for a car enthusiast, because they drive well, lower center of gravity, they're more engaging, etc. But for me, with two separate vehicles, I could allow each one to be a little bit less compromised and a little bit more purposeful. So part of the reason I got rid of the GR86 and the FRS is that they're great, single vehicles, daily driver sports cars, as a compromise, in the sense that if you're a car enthusiast and you want one vehicle to do it all, and you don't actually need 4 usable seats, just 2, maybe occasionally a third in an emergency, then it's actually much more practical than you think, especially when you fold the seats down. I could fit my bike in there. I'd have to take off the front wheel, of course, and the seat post, but it was a very practical car. But the issue is that it didn't feel special enough, at least the second gen, the GR86. So when you get the second vehicle, you want each one to fill that intended role a little bit more intentionally, without compromise. So for me, now I was looking at a Mazda Miata, a S2000, and I've discussed that on a previous video about my decision there, because I want a dedicated track toy. I have an Amira as my weekend GT sports car, and my CX-50 as my daily. Now, when looking at a daily, the things that I'm really thankful for, number one is the practicality. I don't believe that you need to get something way more practical and having way more capacity than you're ever going to use. That's why you see a lot of people with large SUVs who are never needing to use the full space, or very, very rarely once every couple of years when they move or something like that. That's a bit excessive and wasteful. Just rent a moving truck or whatever when you need that. But for me, the CX-50 was perfect. And I'm glad I made that decision in hindsight, because from a practicality perspective, I do occasionally need to seat multiple people comfortably. Like I hosted Thanksgiving at my house, and I drove 4 of my relatives to the airport, and the CX-50 is a 5-seater, so perfect. I could also fit all their luggage in the back. Would have been a little bit more challenging if I was in a sports sedan, right? Also, I go cycling pretty frequently, maybe once or twice a week, outside with my actual bike. The rest I do indoors. But having the CX-50, I did install a tow hitch so I can, put the bike behind me and carry it that way. But if possible, it's actually better to just put it inside your vehicle. So I fold the back seats down and put my entire road bike back there, which is more practical, safer for the bike, less issues fussing with a hitch bike rack, which the one I have is actually really good. I love using it, and I'll use that when I'm going biking with a second person. But when I go by myself, I always just put it in the actual vehicle. The bike is protected, it's less hassle, it's faster, etc. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is you don't want a vehicle, if you're using it day in and day out, you don't want it to suck the life out of you and for you to dread driving it. There's no right or wrong here. It's going to depend on your preferences, what you value in a driving experience. The CX-30 as an example, I think for the class of vehicle, it drives surprisingly well, just like the CX-50, which also drives surprisingly well for the class of vehicle. At the price point, the quality of the steering, the dynamics when you're pushing the car a little bit, the engine, the power, the usable torque, those things align with my values. And I genuinely enjoy driving my CX-50 quite a bit, which is why I keep kind of delaying replacing it, since I only want to replace it when I actually need to tow that S2000 to the racetrack. That's the main reason I will be getting rid of it and replacing it likely later this year. But for me, I care so much about steering. I love this comment I saw on the Miata.net forums where someone called me a steering fetishist, which I think is hilarious and not untrue. Steering is just really important to me. And when it comes to driver enjoyment and even purchasing decisions, yeah, like I bought the Emira in large part because I love the steering and I love a really engaging steering experience when I'm driving a sports car. So for me, something like the CX-50 makes a lot of sense. I don't mind the heavier steering in the 2023. By the way, they did update that for 24. Both the suspension and the steering, which we've reviewed in a previous video. Check that out, linked below. But also the ride is firmer. But because I'm used to driving sports cars, I can tolerate that. And I won't even say tolerate it. It's just that I don't feel like it's stiff or uncomfortable, because my baseline or my reference point is an FRS and a GR86, which aren't as comfortable as the CX-50. But for someone else who, let's say, is coming from a Lexus, a Camry, something that's softer, the CX-50 is going to be a little bit too stiffly sprung for them, right? So go for something else. Go for your CX-5 or your Subaru Outback or whatever else aligns with your values. And I think what a lot of people get wrong is thinking that your daily driver has to be this soul-sucking thing that you dread driving, that is not pleasant. It's not going to be a sports car for most people. If you do daily drive a GR86, FRS, Miata, etc., more power to you. I saw one guy that daily drove an Elise back when I was at med school, which I thought was amazing, super cool, mad respect. And I think for many car enthusiasts, I mean, a lot of you guys know I'm a big Mazda fan because I think they appeal to people like us who want something that's affordable, has a nice interior, and drives pretty well. And don't be afraid to go out and test drive different vehicles you're considering. Before I started this channel, I mean, now obviously with the channel I have access to a lot more vehicles than I ever did before, but even before the channel, I wasn't shy to just go to a dealership and say, hey, I'm considering this vehicle. I test drove an M340i, right, at the dealership. I test drove CX-50. Because it is such a big and important decision, especially if you're a car enthusiast. It's not just a matter of getting from point A to point B. Your vehicle is a form of enjoyment, a form of passion, right? And you want to find something that fits you. You can even rent something for a few days on Turo. Like by driving this for the last few days, I've realized things that I probably wouldn't just from a simple test drive. The rear cargo area doesn't have any hooks for grocery bags, which, small thing, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of silly. I don't know why they didn't include that when the CX-50 has that. It probably doesn't add much cost, right? Very simple little plastic molding. The seats here are more comfortable than the CX-50 in my opinion. They're a little bit more traditional. The CX-50 is kind of like this bench thing, a little bit firmer, you know, on the bottom where your bum can hurt a little bit, and also has this stitching, which doesn't bother me, but has bothered a lot of other people. But then you can make those decisions based on your values. Like, okay, the compromised rear cargo space here where I can't fit my bike, and the steering that's good here, but not as good as the CX-50. Yeah, the CX-50 is the better vehicle for me. Also, I think the styling on that thing is stupidly good and it looks amazing. This one doesn't look ugly, but you know, I really like the CX-50 for a lot of those reasons. And the last thing I would say is don't stretch beyond your means to get a vehicle because you think you need it. If we're being honest, the vehicle we need is the 1995 Toyota Corolla that's worth, I would say 5,000, but with the market today, I don't know, 10,000. And as car enthusiasts, yes, we're getting things that we do not need, but it brings us so much joy and passion. That doesn't mean it's an excuse to make silly financial decisions. There are times when it makes sense to get something that's more reliable, right? That's going to have a lower operating cost in the long term. There's benefits to learning how to work on your own car. Like, no one taught me how to work on a car, but you watch YouTube videos, or you hang out with friends and you learn that way, or you just try things out and then you make mistakes, but you learn along the way. So I did a lot of work on my FRS and my GR86, and you know, a big part of that was the cost savings. Now I'm probably going to get my Amira worked on by my local dealership rather than do my own work. But depending on where you are in your own life, it might make sense to learn that skill set. And if you say you don't have enough time, I get that, but also be real with yourself. Some of you do not have the time, but some of you just spend too much time on Netflix too, right? And taking that Netflix time and funneling that into learning how to work on your car is going to save you more money. It's actually going to bring you some kind of joy because you're learning a skill set and improving and developing, right? But the reason I'm saying these things, by the way, love the GR86, is that I feel for the car enthusiast who wasn't taught a lot of these financial lessons and then makes poor financial decisions that gets them into a position where they are less likely to now own their dream car or something that they're truly excited about. And that's why I talk so much about those kinds of decisions on this channel. Again, informational purposes only, never financial advice. But just to round out that point a little bit more, keep in mind, if you save money and invest that in yourself or in traditional investments, and you let that compounding effect work over several years, you're then much more likely a few years down the road, 5 years later, 10 years later, to be able to afford the Amira or whatever it is, right? So driving that cheaper car that does enough but isn't maybe all that you want. Like, I love my FRS, but I also knew that there are a lot better cars out there that I was more excited to own, etc. I was like, yo, this is a great car for me, and I'm gonna rock this until I first get a house. I'm not gonna upgrade my car until I get a house. And I was considering a Cayman GT4 in 2020 before I got my house in 2021, but I'm glad that I changed my mind about that. And I said, no, I gotta get my priorities straight. I gotta get the house first before I upgrade the car. And then I upgraded the FRS to the GR86, right? And the whole thing's a journey, guys. So you gotta view and frame it in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable. If you view it as just the destination of owning a certain car, you're always going to be unhappy. And then you get the car, it's a brief moment of bliss and happiness for a few days, a few weeks, and then bam, you're back to then wanting the next thing. But if you see it as a journey, you're growing with the car, you're becoming a better driver, you're leveling up your career, you're leveling up your financial education and abilities and investments. It just becomes so much more fun. And then when you finally get that car, which for me was the Amira, it's like, damn, it is so much more rewarding. And especially if you do that, I know a lot of you don't have help. Like, keep in mind, don't compare yourself to the other people out there who have the GT4 at 25, because 99.9% of them had some insane leg up that you don't. They had their college paid for. They had they had down payment on their house. Like, a lot of people out there that you don't consider wealthy, right? They seem like regular Joe Schmoes. They have a lot more privilege and advantage than you or I. And I've talked about that in a previous video right up here, which gets a little bit spicy, just as a warning to you all. But don't compare yourself to them. And trust me, if you view it as a journey and this process of learning, improving, growing, and, especially if you do it by yourself, oh my God, guys, it is so rewarding, let me tell you. And my friends, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you in that next one. Much love.